think one of the things that America has to face is the reality that it is an empire.
No, you mustn't use it. You mustn't use it because it make you rebel. Against what?
They were in front of Radio 8, shooting at the station.
No es un crimen defender nuestros propios derechos como pueblos indígenas.
Greetings and blessings. You're listening to Travelogue Media. I'm Jason Clarl, sending this transmission from a secret bunker in Quetzaltenango, Guatemala. Thanks for joining us. On this episode, we'll be discussing Naomi Klein's Coronavirus Capitalism and How to Beat It, the work of Jean-Marie Simon, and some thoughts on the documentary film When a Tree Falls, the story of the Earth Liberation Front. Stay tuned. Okay, so welcome to the July edition of Travelogue Media. I hope all listeners are safe and healthy and around someone they love or care about. And yeah, welcome back to Travelogue Media. And welcome back, Valeria. This is your second show. And how are you?
I know. I'm very excited.
Good.
Very excited about being here. Thank you for the space.
Sure.
And I'm excited about the show, today's episode.
Good. So yeah, I thought we could just start with like a little bit of a health kind of check-in, like how are things with your family and health and everything? Everyone's doing okay, and I don't know what the virus situation. I don't know what's going on in Seattle as far as coronavirus goes. I know here in Guatemala there are almost just under 24,000 confirmed cases.
Wow.
So, not great news, but we're doing our best. Everyone's distancing and wearing masks, and I hope people are wearing masks where you are. Certainly.
Yeah. The Washington State Governor James Inslee. It's a decree. You have to wear a mask if you want to go inside a store, or if you're going to be like in gatherings. Gatherings, are forbidden. But then again, you have all these people protesting about their rights being taken care of. So it's been crazy, this virus. But the numbers are on the rise. But if you go to the beginning of the things, when some of the analysts, they said it will take like 2 years, and there's going to be like around 2 million people infected.
Wow.
So right now there's 500,000 people infected. So we're still in the first stages.
Yeah. So yeah. Wow. Well, I hope you and your family stay safe. I hope listeners stay safe, and just brace yourself. That's all I can say. And thanks for being here. We're gonna get into a little bit of a COVID capitalism, talking about COVID capitalism in a minute here. But just real quickly, I want to invite listeners and encourage listeners to contact us. Comments and questions are welcome. And I want to give a special shout out to Ken Zone. He's he's been a regular contributor to the show, and I sort of want to apologize for kind of putting him at the end of the last show, and the podcast it's always going through changes and hopefully improvements, and I just want to make sure to give everyone the consideration and attention they deserve. So, but yeah, questions, comments, are more than welcome. We have a lot of different ways you can contact us. There's a call-in number, 303-731-6104, 303-731-6104 in the U.S. That is a Google Voice account, so no one's going to answer, but you can certainly leave your comments and questions. We'd love to hear from you, how you're dealing with all kinds of things, comments on anything you'd like. We also have an email. You can email us at the show, podcast@travelog.media. So, okay.
Great.
Yeah. So I wanted to start off with a piece from Naomi Klein on COVID capitalism, or actually her piece is called Coronavirus Capitalism and How to Beat It. This was from March. So there's a lot that's happened since this piece came out, but it's probably nothing that has made it insignificant or less relevant anyway. So for those who might not know who Naomi Klein is, she is a senior correspondent at The Intercept and the inaugural Gloria Steinem Endowed Chair of Media, Culture, and Feminist Studies at Rutgers. Award-winning journalist, best-selling author of On Fire, The Burning Case for a Green New Deal, The Battle for Paradise, No Is Not Enough, This Changes Everything. And the book I'm going to talk about next is The Shock Doctrine. And Shock Doctrine was published in 2007. And I read it shortly after that. So I'm just going to go off memory basically. But, yeah, she sort of lays out this framework of disaster capitalism, and she references Milton. Well, in the piece, she includes this quote by Milton Friedman, and I'll just read that quote real quick. He said, "Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around." So she uses that to introduce her piece. And so Milton Friedman is this, he was a former Reagan advisor, big proponent of the, free market ideas, the kind of ideology that was driving so much of the U.S.-backed militarism in Latin America. The example that comes first to mind is Chile and Pinochet.
Yeah.
So that was definitely inspired from the Chicago school. He's like, Milton Friedman is like maybe considered like one of the fathers of Chicago school economics. So, but she uses this idea in her piece, and I think it's helpful because I'm kind of a cynic. I'm really a cynic. Like
Good.
I'm cynical about everything. Prove me wrong. I love to be proven wrong. But she takes this idea of like this. We can take the flip side of that, and instead of saying like, okay, yeah, crises are always used to push forward an agenda that is, that furthers inequality, increases suffering, impoverishment, and then takes the other side of that and saying, well, okay, it's an opportunity, right? It's to put forward ideas. She says the ideas that are lying around. That's the key to this is like, okay, whose ideas? A crisis is considered can be considered an opportunity if we're aware of it, and that we're willing to push forward these ideas that we have that are quote unquote lying around. And she outlines all these ideas that are like part of the right, the agenda on the right, that's like cutting Social Security, bailouts for airline industries, fracking companies, financial markets, a trillion, like 1.5 trillion into the financial markets, like after, it's just ridiculous stuff,
It is.
So
it's so scary too.
Yeah, it absolutely is scary. But it has, this, we've seen this before, and from 2008, if you live in the United States, of course you remember the financial crisis then, and same thing happened then. You just got lots of bailouts for corporations. But she also talks about, well, there was she calls the evolutionary leap in the 1930s from the Great Depression. Like, we might not be quite at the level of Great Depression in terms of like unemployment, and I don't know. Like, I know that's getting scary. A lot of people are filing for unemployment.
We're going there.
Yeah, it's like we're heading that direction, right? So
we're heading that direction.
It's absolutely terrifying. But she says, okay, so we have that leap that came out of that. It's like, okay, you can only have so much inequality within a society before something just breaks, and you have to do something. So we have the New Deal from that, right?
Yeah.
And then I just want to mention real quickly these ideas, like, okay, what do we want to put forward? What do we want to promote? What are the changes we want to see as a result going forward? And so it's this interesting idea of like, humans, it's funny because, United States is like human rights, when it's time to go grab Venezuelan oil or, whatever. But at home, it's like, forget it. So healthcare, housing, education as human rights, So that's something that I just wanted to put out there. That's like, want to emphasize, so that we're at a similar moment. And I want to just quickly, I'll sum up by just with quote from Mark Twain. I don't know, remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of like, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And so I think we're definitely in that same kind of situation. So if it rhymes, then we have the Great Depression 2.0, maybe what we're seeing now, and then coming out of that, potentially, could be a Green New Deal. And so that's been the subject of a lot of debate. And so please check out the article. We will put a link in the show notes. And we're gonna go to a quick music break and come back. We're gonna talk about some photographs from Guatemala in the early 1980s. So we'll be right back. Okay, thanks for staying with us. You're listening to Travelog Media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We have added just recently a COVID-19 mask to the online store, so please check the links for that. And I will hand the mic over to Valeria. And Valeria, you will tell us, you're about to tell us about a photographer who did some work in Guatemala in the early 1980s.
Yes. Yeah. And, I really, really admire her work. Her name is Jean-Marie Simon, and she published the book Guatemala, Eternal Spring, Eternal Tyranny. She lived in Guatemala between 1980 and 1988, and she's a photojournalist. And there's just something so powerful in her pictures because she was a foreigner. She was able to move through Guatemala during the war, the worst years of the war, I would say, because, it is proven. It's according to all the statistics and all the testimonials gathered when we signed peace. When death rose from 100 deaths per year because of the war to 10,000 deaths per year in the 80s. And
Wow.
It was because, of course, the United States involvement supporting the military governments in Guatemala, especially the one for Rios Montt, but all of them, honestly. Jean-Marie was able to move to the villages. She was able to witness. So her book shows you the faces of the ones involved. And sometimes you can't believe how polarized Guatemala was and still is. And I think not just to understand Guatemala, but to understand war and conflict in Latin America, her book is a must-read one. And it's on the link. It's on the Travelog Media Facebook page because Jean-Marie, what her vision is, to spread the information, to share the pictures that she took. The book, it's a compilation of 9 years of her work in Guatemala. And she donated 1,000 copies to universities and schools and in public libraries in Guatemala, so everyone could have access to the testimonials. And we have the PDF on the Facebook page. So I think it's something that people should read. And look at the pictures.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking at this now. Do you have the title? I don't have it right in front of me. I don't know if you have the title of the book.
Yes.
It is in the show notes.
Guatemala. Yeah, the book title is Guatemala, Eternal Spring, Eternal Tyranny.
Okay.
Sorry about my accent.
Yeah. I mean, it's looking at these photos. I'm just looking at one, and it's the one that's called. I'll try to translate. So, Reunión del Consejo de Comunidades Étnicas Runugel, Hunam, Santa Cruz del Quiché, 1989. So it's a meeting of the Runugel Hunam Ethnic Communities Council. If my translation is not too bad, and it's just. I'm just trying to place myself in this photo because I should just, I don't think these photos should be at all taken for granted. Because it could just as easily been the case that, we don't have any of these, the record that we do have. So we should be, grateful to have this record. But it just seems like I know for
for me, and I know probably for a lot of estadounidenses, it's, war is just such an abstraction, even with images. I mean, we're bombarded with images. We have lots of images, and it's still there's something that we'll just never be able to get. Just, I mean, yes, we need to have this visual record. We need to have these photos, and they're great photographs, but it's just so.
You know why they're important, Jason? Because the Guatemalan armed conflict, it was different than the conflict in El Salvador, for example.
Mm-hmm.
The conflict in El Salvador took place in San Salvador,
mm-hmm.
in the capital, in the city. It involved civilians, and it was right open. The conflict in Guatemala was so, how you say, I don't know, horrendous. And it happened in the mountains. It happened in the rural areas, and they were targeting indigenous communities.
Mm-hmm.
The conflict in Guatemala didn't happen in the city. So you can still find people that say, I don't think there was a war in Guatemala. I never heard of it.
Yeah,
there are still people that think that. So a book like this, it's important because it's right there. It shows you
mm-hmm.
the faces of the people. It shows you how, I know there's a picture of when the soldiers are walking in one of the rural villages, and you can see the adobe houses in the highlands, in the Guatemalan highlands. I'm pretty sure that's either Quiché. There's like a line of soldiers just going there, and the women are standing on the doors of their houses, just watching them. It
mm-hmm.
was like that.
Yeah,
it was, the army just could walk wherever they wanted, and you as a civilian couldn't move. And if you were in the city, sometimes you wouldn't know. Like, you would know there was some type of conflict going on. You would know that there was a guerrilla,
mm-hmm.
that army that existed, but you wouldn't know if it was real or not. Because obviously, the press, the channels, the TV channels, everything was controlled by the government.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It was like a government. It was like a dictatorship, like a tyranny that just stuck there for 36 years. Like, the faces of the military men changed, but the core was always the army controlling the country. So that's why it's so hard. And in a book like Jean-Marie Simon's is so important, because it shows you that there was indeed a war going on in Guatemala, and that it targeted indigenous communities.
Yeah.
And some people that lived in the cities never saw this. They don't even believe there was a war. So that to me, that's why this book is so important.
Right. Yeah. And it is interesting that it's still very, society is still very much divided into people. Like, just to take an example, like, I know there was some, controversy over, like, the film Cuando tiemblan las montañas. What's the director's name now?
When the mountains tremble. Yes.
Yeah, even that is like there was a scene, I think, that was the subject of a little bit of controversy, because it was supposed to have depicted an attack from the military, and there was a dispute about whether it was the guerrillas or if it was the ejército, the army. But yeah, people are very much divided still, and so we need to, that people are like denying or trying to, like, I just saw a spray paint on the wall the other day. Si hubo genocidio, yes, there was genocide, because there are certainly people who want to just wipe that out, wipe out the
it's
memory.
The people in power.
Yeah.
You have to understand, it's a whole strategy of the government. Mm-hmm. If they don't talk about it, if they don't acknowledge it, it never happens. So it doesn't have to be included on the history books. It doesn't have to be taught in schools. You don't have to talk about it because it never happened. That's why they minimize that it was a civil war. They don't. There's still people that don't acknowledge it as a civil war. They just mention it as a conflict.
Right.
There's still people saying that it wasn't a genocide. When we signed peace, there was a whole effort by the Catholic Church and also by United Nations to gather testimonials from the people involved. So they conducted interviews from both sides, the guerrilla and the army, and also from the survival people from the villages.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they documented all the horrors of the war, But you still find people saying that that's not true.
Yeah.
But normally the people that want to deny that are the ones that are directly involved. If they accept that there was a genocide, then they have to accept that the whole machinery of the state was against poor people and just killing them systematically as a racist machinery.
Yeah.
And that's why they're in, of course they're not going to accept it. That's why books like Jean-Marie Simon's are so important.
Absolutely.
Movies like When the Mountains Tremble, like Granito,
right,
that just tell you the story of how the whole trial of the dictator
right
happened.
Right. Yeah, I still have a copy of the Prensa Libre the day when Rios Montt died. Hold on, I can't.
Yeah. When Rios Montt died, and he was convicted for genocide, and then they removed the conviction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so,
that was overturned.
On May 10th, yes, that was overturned.
But that was significant, right? Maybe we could do a whole other episode just on that. But that was a pretty significant decision on the court.
Yes.
Someone who's found guilty of genocide, right? So it's wow, that's I don't think that's happened anywhere else in the world. Maybe I could be wrong, but
especially him. No, especially him.
Yeah,
especially him. It was under his wing, under the U.S. wing, and under his ruling that it was a governmental policy to just pursue the guerrilla and crush them. And the methods the Guatemalan army used were horrific, and the horrors that war left were bad, and you can understand, and that this will lead us to our next segment, where we're going to talk about, because in the next segment we're going to talk about the documentary If a Tree Falls, right?
Yes.
So I want to talk about that, but I just want to mention something from the Guatemalan Civil War. There were communities that were able to organize themselves and kick the army out after a massacre. Like communities like Santiago Atitlan, like San Pedro, La Laguna, they were able to kick the army out of their communities and just, declare themselves secluded, and there were no cops allowed. But the effort to reach that was very high, it was very high.
So unfortunately, I lost a little bit of Valeria's audio during the episode. So with the magic of editing, I'll make everything wonderful again. We're going to do a quick music break. Be sure to look for the link to Jean-Marie Simon's book, Guatemala, Eternal Spring, Eternal Tyranny. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the documentary film When a Tree Falls, a story of the Earth Liberation Front. Entramundos needs your help. Since the first coronavirus case in Guatemala, the government has established a series of restrictions and measures that seek to contain and mitigate the spread of the disease. However, due to the high percentage of virus contagion and a weak health and governance system in Guatemala, currently the country is mired in a health and economic crisis that is getting worse every day. Considering that Entre Mundos is a Guatemalan association committed to defending and promoting the rights of the most marginalized and vulnerable populations in the country, we know that right now communities require our support, and for this reason, we created this campaign to support Guatemalan families. We hope that you will be part of this campaign. Please look for a link to the GoFundMe campaign in the show notes below, and if you can't help, please consider sharing the link in your social networks. Thank you. Back?
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay.
Yikes. Okay. All right. Sorry, we lost you for a minute there. But yeah, what were your initial thoughts on seeing this documentary about the part of the world you live in? Now this is like Oregon is the next door neighbor, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that struck me from this documentary is what he says. That the patronizing, he talks about the patronizing attitude of the ones that love you but don't get it. I've had that so many times.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that so many times, it's the patronizing attitude. That's what got him. And then he tells how he started going more radical every time, the documentary. And it talks about the Earth Liberation Front Now, I'm going to tell you something about me. I don't romanticize violence. Maybe because I grew up in a country that wasn't under war, and my family educated me. While we were during the war, I knew what was going on. I had that, I was lucky enough. I wasn't one of the Guatemalans whose family denied the Civil War. We knew, we were aware of it. My grandpa was kidnapped in 1967.
Wow.
And we never saw him again. And so I knew, and I understand what he was saying. That's why it resonated with me, but I don't romanticize violence. I don't think, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't get them. To me, they are entitled.
Well,
and I know you really like the idea. To me, they are entitled, and I'm going to tell you why. And I was thinking, okay, I don't think Jason will agree with me, but I'm going to tell you something. There's this quote by Bertolt Brecht, and it says, "There are men that fight one day and are good. Others fight 1 year and they're better. And there are those who fight many years and are very good. But there are the ones who fight their whole lives. Those are the indispensable ones." And, they had this great idea and great ideals and the Earth Liberation Front. And then at the freaking first thing, they cracked. They went against each other and they just gave up on the whole thing. They shouldn't have gone that radical if they weren't ready to give up their life for it. You know, because then they just make a joke out of the whole thing. And they just, they just feed the idea that radical people are just radical because they want violence. And that's not the point. So to me, maybe because I'm from Latin America, to me, they're just entitled white kids.
Yeah.
That could have used their privileges to raise their voices. They could have used their sensitivity, the one that pushed them to act differently. They could have used that with all their privileges to raise their freaking voices, to try to, but they didn't.
Right.
It was just, at the first time, they stopped fighting. So that's why that quote from Bertolt Brecht resonates in me so much, because the indispensable ones are the ones that fight all life. And, they're also the romanticization of violence. Violence kills you, but don't get me wrong.
Well,
I do think,
I mean, your point. Absolutely. Your point about the privilege part is absolutely. That's something that's not. Most of them are probably, they can go back to normal lives after that.
They're back to their lives. They just deny the whole thing, ratted on a few of them, and those two are the ones that are serving time in jail. The other ones just pledge for a deal and are free and forget about getting involved in politics or raising your voice, because no, it's true. Then what was the point, guys? Really? Seriously? You just wanted to commit arson?
Well, okay, but they do make the point in that there's like, okay, there's violence against, there's property damage. There's the argument is like, well, how do we know where to make the distinction? We were talking about, is all violence equal? If we're targeting people, and that was what ultimately drove the group apart in the film, right? It was this discussion. It was like, oh, we're not going far enough. We need to target people now. And versus those were like, no, forget it. Because they were like, they were very, at least in the initial stages, they were very careful to only to make absolutely sure that there were no humans injured in these arsons. And yes, it's property damage. It's you can say what you want about that and the results of that, and it has consequences. But yeah. But I wanted to but you can definitely see the appeal, the reason that they were
Yes.
wanted to use these tactics. Because
I understand. I mean, listen, I know that no real social change is happening without force, And Chomsky talks a lot about this. Like, he says any rational person would agree that violence is not legitimate unless the consequences of such actions are to eliminate a still greater evil. So I'm not just saying optimistically, oh, I hate violence. And I know that sometimes you need violence to defeat a greater evil. What I didn't like about these people was like, where is their commitment? Then if they weren't that committed, if they gave up so fast, they shouldn't have gone they could have stayed their lives. We need people raising their voices.
Yeah.
We need people, we need the indispensable ones.
Mm-hmm.
They're good. What they did, I understand. That's why I quoted Brecht.
Mm-hmm.
They're good. The ones that fight a couple of days, the ones that fight for a year, they're better. But the ones that fight their whole lives, those are the indispensable ones.
Right.
Because we're facing a whole machinery here. We need committed people.
Yeah.
And that's what I think.
Yeah. Well, there is the scene where I'm forgetting the name of the character now, but the young woman who was she ultimately ended up like saying she ultimately agreed to cooperate, right? She was gonna offer her testimony against the other group members, and she was like, well, you think you're strong, and it's like she started out thinking, it's like, I was someone who thought that if we ever get caught, none of us are ever we're just gonna not cooperate, and then they came knocking on her door, and suddenly and she says, well, I guess sometimes you're not as strong as you think you are.
And you can't blame them, Jason, because they were facing the law. You're like, who am I to say, I respect them. I just feel that efforts like that, they are more like ego satisfying than really focusing on more goals. And I'm going to mention just a couple of things. Like, if you don't have committed people, you have actions like this that result in nothing, no real change. For example, the Arab Spring. You remember the Arab Spring? You remember the rising in Egypt? It was like 2011, I think. And the Occupy movement. And then it just waters down, and the protests, the demonstrations in Guatemala in 2015, like the whole country was in their Pacific movement, Pacific demonstrations trying to withdraw the corrupt government of Otto Perez Molina, and they did. But then you would expect that they would follow through with a real change, demanding other things and the end of corruption and demanding a real change, but they don't. So what worries me about movements like this is that the lack of education and the lack of a real leadership, I don't know, or commitment, just they're more interested in the now than in the future. And you can see that, I don't know, Capitol Hill, Chas Chop, it just happened in Seattle. They first it was called Chas because it was Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, and they declare an autonomous zone out of a free zone out of the government, and then they changed it for CHOP, Capitol Hill Organized Protest, and it was beautiful. to me. But then, you know, it gotten violent. They start having guards with guns, and they start replicating. They even build walls around. You know, so it makes no sense. And I think it harms more than it helps.
Yes.
Because we need to focus on the big thing.
Right.
And because of movements like that are, you know, people take the left light, not as committed, you know,
Right.
just like random acts of violence. I don't know. It's very difficult. But I'm not disregarding anyone's commitment. I'm just saying action should be planned, and the greater impact should be measured.
Well, yeah. I think there was a point where in the film where McGowan was talking about, this is like, well, yeah, there were a lot of other questions involved, but I wasn't thinking about those at the time. It's like you get caught up in because it's a very you have something like this that you're very passionate about. There's a lot of, you get caught up in the emotion of it, the impact, and for some it was more about the appeal of the violence, or the appeal of the doing the damage, to seeing you know, these logging companies just get a little bit of, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah, I can relate to that. But, you know, the point is it really helping the big cause?
Well, yeah, ultimately, in this case, yeah. How are you out of time? How are you doing?
I need to go.
Okay. Valeria, thank you very much. We'd love to continue.
I'm going back to the rat race.
Okay.
But thank you for the space.
You're welcome. Have a good day, rest of your day at work, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Dude, I love it. I hope, you know, I don't want to disregard anyone's commitment. I didn't want to sound, you know, I'm just saying we need to show unity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And commitment.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I enjoy this episode, but yeah, I need to go back to the rat race. So thank
I
you.
understand. Okay.
Okay. I'm going back to my wheel.
Okay. Stay safe and stay healthy, and bless, and see you next time.
Okay. Sounds great. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay, so that's going to do it for this episode. Music by Airtone and Docent Sigmund. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links. And again, you can find Travelogue Media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as other fine podcast providers. Find new episodes every third Thursday. Que todo sea amor. Walk tall, live free.